This is Molten Chat coming to you from the afternoon in a sunny Norfolk, and I have no idea what the weather's like in Tokyo, but it's probably dark. Please let us know. Yeah, please let us know in the chat if you can hear us and see us, and we'll kick off. So we'll just hum to ourselves for 30 seconds. If there's anybody out there in the chat, it'd be very helpful just to let us know, and eventually we'll just crack on anyway. So no beer this evening. I mean, it's not this evening. It's coffee time for me. Lunchtime.
And unironically, I'm having some rouge, misspelled rouge.
Yes, that's nice. See, I'd like to be doing that.
My first few years DJing as Bob Rogue, very often on the flyer, it was spelled rouge.
Really?
My dismay.
Yeah. Well, they couldn't believe the name was so cool, you see. It says, that's far too cool. You can't have that name.
You know. My parents were hippies. No, just kidding.
Oh, people say they can hear us and see us. That's great. In that case, I'll launch into a bit of an intro. Hello, I'm Robin Vincent. This is Molten Chat. Part of my contribution to Superbooth is to chat to people I find interesting within the industry or doing interesting things. And today we have Mr. Bob Rogue. He's live streaming in from Tokyo, which is very exciting. It's some time of the night over there, which is why we're doing this a bit more at lunchtime. And Bob is famous for many things, but the things that we know and love him for is his association with Black Corporation. Black Corporation are behind such machines as the Deckard's Dream and Kijimi. I don't know how to say that one. And
you got it.
And other things that no doubt we'll have a poke around in and talk about. So that's the plan for today, is just to have a chat about those sorts of things and see how you're all doing. So Bob, tell us how you're doing, mate. Let's start with that.
Doing okay. We're kind of on holiday, but it's been extended to, well, the Japanese government just announced a state of an extension to the state of emergency through to the end of May. And we're going to figure out what that means. It seems like people are still going out, but keeping their distance. They're being kind of responsible going out with wearing masks and stuff. But there are still some bars where people are a little close for our comfort.
Yeah. I guess you have a culture of mask wearing in that part of the world. Would that be true?
Yeah. It's not weird to see a lot of Japanese people wearing masks. Now you're starting to see a lot of expats wearing them. It's just kind of funny. It just happened all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Usually, expats would wear them just to hide a zit or something, but now everyone just.
Yeah, well, I imagine there should be lots of fashionable type masks in Tokyo. I mean, we look to there for a lot of our culture these days, I think. So that's
you'd expect some more interesting designs, but I'm seeing a lot of the homemade ones. Some friends are making in the U.S. and they're a lot more exciting.
Oh, no, well, there we go.
I'm trying to think. Oh wait, here's my stash of masks. All right, we have this. This is just a black. It's basically made out of cushion material. So that was what I was able to get after all the masks got sold out. And then
right.
This is one that cost me $1.50 on Amazon, but I had to pay $4 to get it shipped, and it was 3 masks. So that was really efficient. And then there are a bunch of these masks. These are apparently made in China, but they're pretty good quality. A little box of 50. I sent one to my parents, but now that the shipping lines are all backed up, they still haven't gotten them after 2 weeks.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And these are the closest, what look like the N95 masks, the ones that the hospital workers are supposed to wear, but it's tiny. And now I just look like a weird bird.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not particularly stylish, I have to say. I think the apocalypse is supposed to look groovier
A
than
little more.
that. Yeah, well, it's interesting to see them in the flesh because we're not wearing anything like that over here. I mean, I'm out in the wilds of Norfolk, so we feel very untouched. Largely, I mean, it's a factor, but there aren't a lot of people wearing masks our way.
Robin, you're coming with me for a second because that alarm meant the stuffed peppers are ready.
Oh, well, that's very exciting.
So, yeah. Conversation, a YouTube conversation about synths just became a cooking program.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I'll relate. In the first time we met, I think, was at Superbooth last year. I seem to recall.
Yep.
And as Superbooth is, you get like 5 seconds really to talk to each other. Right. It's like, hey, all right, Bob, yeah, hi, good to see you. Oh, yeah, it's been great to see you. Great to talk to you.
You're pretty busy.
Yeah, and then 5 other people are asking you questions, and somebody else is tagging on your arm, and it's like, oh, bye then. Yeah. I'll pop round later, and of course you never do. So this year, Superbooth is kind of giving us a lot more time and space to think about things and talk about things, and actually get down to the nitty-gritty of how we feel about gear and stuff and Superboothing and and all those bits and pieces. So. In many ways, this has its advantages. It has its little silver linings. Are we going to have to watch you eat?
I'll take off-camera bites. But you do have to see these because they came out pretty nice.
Oh, that's good, man.
Ooh, yeah. Speaking of YouTube, I learned how to cook from YouTube. So this is definitely one acquired. I'll send you the link later.
Yeah.
But they're going to need to cool off a little bit, or a lot of it. But the whole apartment is super hot because the oven was going, and looking forward to it cooling down a little bit. Sorry, I'm sweating.
Yeah, you're fine.
That explains the shine. So Superbooth. It was funny because we only got to talk for about 5 or 10 minutes, and didn't see you around after that. But I got to meet your son.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a last minute decision that you made to get out there.
Yeah, well, I'm an error about it. Every year it comes up. It's like something I really like to do. It just doesn't always come off because it involves a bit of thought and a bit of travel, a bit of an expense, all that kind of thing. And I think the year before it was over a bank holiday, and so I wasn't able to get that time away. But last year was fine, and I was hoping to bring 2 sons this year. My middle son was just getting old enough to claim his right to come along, and I had no more excuses to keep putting him off. So we were all ready to go on that, and of course denied. But never mind. Is Superbooth a fun thing for you? Was that your first visit last year, or have you been previously?
Well, it is, and that was my second time. But actually, before we get into that, one thing I'm curious about. With your kids, and I don't have kids, but I'm always like, this is always a thing that I think about, like the kids' interest in these events and what their parents are into with regards to synths and stuff. I've seen some that are totally of course not into it and on their phones. Then some at the shows do actually go and they're on their phones. Where are your kids on that?
It's a good question. Well, my intention behind it is to give them an opportunity to try stuff. I mean, I would very much love them to be into music and into the gear and bits and pieces in any way or any form. But I've always stood away from imposing it upon them, like piano lessons or guitar lessons or something like that, unless they actually came forward, and asked for them. But for something like this, the initial thing was there's many reasons, I suppose. In one hand, I wanted to hold a camera. Can you hold a camera and take pictures of me with the gear? Can you do that?
Child labor.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. There's a bit of he's a safety net. So if I because I'm not necessarily an outgoing person in a social situation, and so it's somebody I can kind of hide behind or say, oh, my boy needs to take me off so I can get out of a tricky situation. And it's also someone to talk to so you don't feel lonely. So it fills all those sorts of functions. But as far as getting them into the gear, I mean, Alfie, my oldest, has come along to a few things now, to Synthfest as well, and a couple of modular things. And he has an interest. He likes to play and put headphones on and play the noises. But of course, mostly they lean towards the big Yamaha keyboards because they're instantly impressive, as opposed to put on a modular thing that's just making funny noises and there's no way of it interacting with it that you can understand, whereas big keyboard crash, that's brilliant. They enjoy those sorts of things. The youngest one, though, he really just wanted to come for the pretzels. He thought that's the most exciting thing ever, to buy a pretzel and eat it, and that's really his only interest. Pretzels, and going that's on an airplane, that's a factor.
I definitely went through a lot of pretzels at Superbooth.
Yeah, but they're available everywhere. I've never seen the like. So but I mean, on the whole, they seem that they're not disinterested by any stretch, but I haven't yet seen them pick up anything as a passion. Alfie has tried to teach himself guitar over the lockdown period, which has been interesting, and he's somehow he started to learn Smoke on the Water. I mean, where does that come from? Where do they find that as a thing to learn?
Are you a Creedence fan or?
No, not particularly. Wow. I just don't quite understand where he's listening to classic rock. I mean, it's something coming from somewhere. So how is that still everybody's first song to learn? But I don't know. But they're endlessly fascinating anyway.
At least you're not in the like what kids are listening to these days kind of atmosphere. I mean, that's I'd be happy with my job going in that direction.
Yeah.
You play guitar, right?
I do, yeah. I play a bit of guitar, yeah.
And does he ask you for pointers, or is he just trying to learn on his own?
No, we're trying to do a little. Yeah, I'm trying to give him some help, trying to do a little bit together. Just encouraging him along. It's that, as I say, it's a very difficult line to walk over. Wanting to say, right, sit down, let me teach you something, and just whatever, man, just do it, and then we'll see where we get to, and I don't know what the best course of action is, other than to relax into the idea. We've also done some soldering. We did some soldering of a little synth at the beginning of the lockdown, which was cool, and I need to finish that video off actually. So that'd be good, because unfortunately it didn't work at the end. That was the downside.
Yeah, I finally started on DIY kits. Little. I don't know if it's a little known thing about me in Black Corporation is I'm not an engineer, and I'm not doing any of the soldering or anything. I do some of the assembly, but not the high tech stuff, not the SMD stuff. And so this is kind of why I first contacted you, is because before I was even involved in the business, I was watching your videos because always been into synths, and I was still really new to like modular. Okay. And it was basically around the same time that you were getting into modular gear was when I was getting into modular gear. So I was watching your videos, and I was like, kind of relatable in that sense. And then, when we were starting the company, and we made the DIY kits available for Deckard's Dream. This had been after you had done a few DIY builds, and the impression that Roman gave me on building these is it's super easy, and like anyone can do it. And I was like, well, okay. And I was busy, assembling the factory built one, so I couldn't attempt to build one myself. I didn't have the time for it. But I was like, well, if anyone can do it, maybe this guy that I'm like enjoying his videos, so let's send him over one and just kind of like throw him at it. So it's been really fun to watch your progress on those videos. And from the start, Roman just posted this weekend this like the 3-year anniversary of us posting that original ad video.
Right. Yeah.
And, and you start off with that, and like, the whole introduction was like, oh my God, this is great. This is like, it was so gratifying to see that. So it was, it's been kind of a rewarding experience from my end, seeing you get through the build, running into little pitfalls and like little barriers, and you'd be able to get through it. Just to show that, I'm not saying like just anyone, but like, it is doable.
It is.
So, that was the whole idea behind that. And that's why I was like very hands off about it, and still am until you finally get sounds out of it.
Yeah. I mean, it was a lovely idea. I mean, I was totally overwhelmed by the concept, and because I love the promo. I mean, everything about it really resonated with me, from loving Vangelis's music in the past, then the quality of that little promo of the streets of Tokyo and bits and pieces that were in that, just going, this is a lovely thing. And then of course understanding that Roman was associated with it, and knowing him a little tiny bit from Sputnik Modular and that kind of thing, because I'd also heard about the Roman talk about the project, I think on some forum somewhere where it was discussed for a bit before it ever came to light. So all of those things were leading towards the potential of an extraordinary product, and then getting the opportunity to perhaps build one was just fantastic. I mean, there is a couple of things I'd like to set straight, I think, because some of the commentary that I've had to the videos has kind of misunderstood the relationship, I think. In as much as, I moan a bit and whinge and say, well, I can't get this bit to work and it doesn't say anything, and I've lost this and this bit, I don't know what to do with this. But as you say, I overcome these problems. So when Roman says it's an easy build, it is, because the actual soldering itself isn't difficult. The layout of the board is great. There's plenty of room. Even with the surface mount stuff, there's plenty of room to learn how to do that by hand. And that's been extraordinary. I've loved entering into that and working it out, particularly also in the face of other people saying, you can't do that, you need to have an oven and you need to have paste and this, that and the other. It's like, what do I don't know. So I've enjoyed proving these people wrong. There's a little bit of that in there, so I feel good about that. But as I say, I do come against problems, and then I highlight them and say I don't know what to do. And what I need to stress is that it wasn't provided to me as a DIY kit. You didn't ship an entire kit of stuff with all the instructions. That's not what it's about. You produce, or at least my understanding is, you produce this kit for people who are interested in starting this challenge, which means working from a bill of materials, working from schematics and PCBs. That's your lot. Off you go. Get on with it. So although it is relatively easy, that it's not taking you by the hand. There's limited instructions, and actually what's happened is that a community is built up around it, and the shared knowledge and experience of that community is what enables lesser beings like myself really to get through these problems. So I wasn't expecting it to be a walk in the park, but any problems that I have are just real, and so I think they are important that they're on camera. But I'm not by any stretch saying that Black Corporation have behaved badly or are not helping me, because that's not really the deal in the first place. So as long as people understand that this is a journey, and it's my exploration of this, and hopefully my videos will help other people along the line, that to me it's kind of the essence of it. Sorry,
but I definitely not a walk in the park. And again, like at the time when we started putting these kits together, like I didn't know jack about like this business and like the whole DIY community and everyone. And I am really happy with how the whole community came together, because as soon as Roman announced this and started taking pre-orders, he's had relationships with all the people in that community for a while, but he didn't really correspond with them so often. And Some people just took it by the horn and started their own build groups. Like obviously, Steve Summers is helping you a lot with the build.
Yeah.
Ando and Yane Isotalo are also like pretty vocal on fixing little little glitches and things like that. So everyone in the community has been really amazing at helping out with this kind of thing. And yeah, when so I as I mentioned, oh shoot, that was I hit repeat on the alarm for these peppers, but they're all ready now. So I just got started on my own DIY builds with some Erica synths modules.
Yeah.
And only one has come out working perfectly. The other ones I need to go back into and do a little troubleshooting for. I was doing them in my parents' kitchen in Ithaca when I was visiting them at the beginning of this whole pandemic. And, sitting in their kitchen with, an Amazon bought solder kit and going through those. So now I finally have some time to actually go into them. But there isn't a community around, say, like the Erica synths envelope generator as there is for people around the DIY kits that we've sent out. And it's really nice to see that. My hidden agenda is it makes a little less work for me because these guys are all enthusiastically helping out the lesser solderers. But it's really kind of gratifying to see that community coming together like that. And we have nothing but love for them. So I'm glad they're helping.
Yeah, they've been very helpful. I mean, because there is, I mean, the fear about doing a project of this size is that, because I don't ever really want to come across as an idiot. I don't mind coming across as a novice or an amateur, but to come across as an idiot, and that's always the slight fear when I'm asking questions about something which to an engineer is so obvious that I feel, end up feeling a bit stupid. But that hasn't really occurred, and Facebook hasn't, the Facebook group hasn't given me that impression either. They've been patient, they've been kind and pointed out things at a level that I can grasp, I think. Once I've worked on it a little bit.
They're really patient and enthusiastic bunch of guys on there.
Yeah.
So
the other thing that really gave me heart was that I spoke to Gertz a week or so ago from Erica Synths, and he said, I think before we're actually on camera, so in my conversation beforehand, he said how he has just finished building his, and it's taken him a year. Really? And it's taken Gertz a year, and I'm by the summer it'll be a year since I got the components. I mean, I had the kit for about 3 or 4 months before I actually ordered the rest of the stuff. But build time wise, it's been about 9 months so far. So that makes me feel so much better that I'm not, because it's taking too long. I didn't want it to take this long. I hope to have had it finished by now, but it's just the way of things. And with a bit of luck, I was going to have another go at it next week, I think. So, but it feels good that someone of Gert's ability has taken his time, and also it didn't work. It put some of the chips in backwards, stupid things like that. He said. So. That fills me with a slight sense of confidence, and it's all going to be all right. It's all going to be all right. Well, we don't.
Well, I think we should definitely have another one of these chats when you're done with the build, and then we'll go through all of your the pros and cons and stuff, and we'll use that for a bit of research on how to continue doing things like these DIY projects that we're doing.
So you do plan to have that as an aspect of what you do you think?
Well, we're a little reluctant on Xerxes, the new synth.
Yes.
Just because, we're just trying to be a little more aware of the intellectual property of the stuff that we're doing, and how we're sharing some of the information of what we're doing, just to kind of protect our business a little bit. But for the most part, that's not been a major concern of mine. I don't see it as a big concern, but it's just we're just trying to look at big picture wise whether or not we want to continue with that aspect of the business. But I think we're going to at least keep, Deckard's Dream and Kijimi available. And with the expander, we don't plan on doing another run of the expander as it is right now. But we have plenty of DIY kits if anyone really wants that unit. And that is not such a difficult build. It's just 3 PCBs and some surface mount, but everything's relatively easy on that one.
Cool, yeah.
So we are keeping those 3 kits.
I mean, I guess if you think about it, you're essentially giving people the recipe and a list of ingredients, aren't you, to build something that you've worked very hard on putting together. So, yeah, I suppose I hadn't thought about it that way. You do very much open up this product to anyone to essentially build their own without any reference to you whatsoever, So, yeah, that is
as much as we want to be, Elon Musk like in the synth world, keeping everything, free, shared, Creative Commons. We're still, trying to make sure we can pay our rent and, the business going. So, we'll roll that out, over time possibly, but for now it's, just trying to determine what the best way to kind of go about that long term.
Was it always a plan to build more synths? I mean, was a direct Deckard's Dream the first? Was intended to be the first of a line, or were you going to see how that went and then go from there?
I think, when Roman came up with the idea for everything, he did, kind of have, a plan in mind. And the only thing that's changed is probably like the time frame of the launch of everything, because so he went from the idea of Deckard's from December of 2016 to we shipped the first batch in November of the following year. So you guys were talking about taking a year or 9 months to build your units.
Yes.
This guy was able to put together this whole idea within that time frame, which is really, I'm still a little pretty impressed by that. Then so we went out with Deckard's Dream for Superbooth, and by the following Superbooth, we had just shipped. Oh, the night before I flew out for that Superbooth, we had just shipped the first. No. Wait, was it? I think we were packing to ship the first run of Kijimi, so that was within a year of just getting Deckard's out. We were already working on Kijimi. And this past year, towards the end of the year, we finally started getting all the Xerxes out. And that took a lot more work, just because it's a much smaller thing. And, the engineers, it kept the engineers busy.
Right. So just to remind us, or remind me, so that Deckard's Dream, that one I do know, is based on inspired by the CS80. The Kijimi, was that the polycobalt? Was that the
Kijimi?
So get me that right.
I thought you were a Star Wars guy. So the idea. So here's where the inspiration from, the cobalt or the polycobalt would have come from. It's basically the smooth wave shaping. Going between all the waveforms for the oscillators and the modulation matrix. And aside from that, the rest of the ideas were just kind of all of us, kind of giving ideas of what we like about synthesizers and how some things work. So there's a cycling envelope that's based on this idea, and then this filter, and so it was, just those ideas loosely came from, I guess you can say inspired by the cobalt and the polycobalt. The Xerxes is our most laser harp friendly synth.
Ooh.
If that if that points in any directions, I'm not sure if that would, but yeah, if you think laser harps, then you'll kind of get the what that was inspired by. But as a general principle, I try to avoid saying names just to avoid getting beat downs from the boss. Yeah.
No, fair enough. No, I've seen Jean-Michel Jarre in concert with his laser harp, so I'll get a fair idea about that, I think. But
the one thing that I should point out about the new synth is the first two synths are VCO based, and this is DCO based,
yes,
mostly. So it's a little cleaner. It's more precise with landing on notes. And how was it? They came out good. Sorry, pepper. But yeah, so it's a lot more precise than like kind of the warm, weird stuff of the first synths. So a lot more reliable in sound. But yeah.
Oh, how interesting. Do you see? Where do you see this developing? Are there plans underway for the next project? Are you researching something new, or is something already on its way?
Well, that's an interesting question. We do have a couple of modules coming out. The first one being Deckard's voice,
yes,
which is just a single from Deckard and Rachel, which will bring envelope and ring mod and some other really interesting things. So the pair is going to be pretty fun to work with. The whole pandemic situation has really, really slowed.
Yes, yeah, of course.
On this, getting things together for that. But we're hoping to get those out at least by the summer. And I think those will be pretty fun, new things. I think Roman wanted to get out of Eurorec in general because his stuff with Sputnik, which like that's my first module was the Sputnik dual oscillator. He's a gift for letting him stay here while he was waiting to get his visa. I didn't even have a power supply or a case, so I was just like, I have a module. That's how I got my start. And they're really cool and well thought out modules. But he just kind of felt like he ran through the natural course of somebody building analog Eurorec modules, going through the oscillator, the dual oscillator, and envelope, and VCA and filter. And so he kind of wanted to leave that whole business, but then he was like, "Whoa, why not make a Deckard's voice?" And so that's that. So I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's getting a lot of interest. So we're going to see how that goes and how the logistics of building it and shipping it out. If it's similar to how we're doing with everything else, then we could expand into that area. I think there's from kind of the zeitgeist of like the atmosphere at our company. Roman wants to kind of reimagine, especially like the expander, for example. Like the original idea going to have like control voltage going into control MIDI out to the Deckard dream, so people can connect the modular. So he was kind of connecting his old world with the new world. Yes. And instead of that, we just made an effects rack. So I think with us knocking that out, and this is, I can either confirm or deny this.
Of course.
I'm getting the feeling like I'm just prognosticating. I mean, that could be in the works, not anytime soon, but that could be a direction. I personally, when we have different ideas in how we want to work with the company and how we want to work with collaborations and things like that. So there are a couple of things on that front that I'm thinking that maybe he's not into. So it's things that we just need to kind of all come in one mind about.
Yeah.
And so we have ideas stirring up, but nothing kind of defined as the next project.
Okay. I mean, from my point of view, Sputnik, I think, seemed to be very ahead of the curve. I mean, because I started in Riorac only a few years ago, he was already going out the other door, so he'd already had many years beforehand doing all of that, which seemed very, very new to me, and yet, of course, has been around a lot longer. So that is interesting that that just before, if you like, the peak of Eurorack, as that's starting to come in, that he's already passed that and moving on to other things. I think one of the things that really works or could work in Eurorack is that the look of the Deckard's Dream is, there's something about it that really nailed it. I can't exactly put my finger on what it is, because the color by itself isn't particularly interesting, but the combination of the color with the sliders, there's something, I don't know, something you stumble upon there that looks really nice, and the module, both the Rachel and the voice, look brilliant. And again, they don't match anything. That's not going to be the same color as anything else in your rack, but it just looks really nice. There's something about it that's
Roman's got a great eye for design. And I'm someone who's terrible with anything visual. I take the worst pictures and everything, and when I'm with Roman, he's like, "Oh, take a picture of this." I'm like, "No, you're going to make fun of it later," because he's got a very, very keen eye for how to present a picture or how to take a picture and how to design a panel and how a circuit board should be laid out. While you're going through your build, you can see how kind of particular he is about the layout of the thing. It's not a mess like when you go into any old synthesizers, really carefully laid out, and I think it's his own little mental condition that gets him in the right sense. But he's got a really great sense for visual, so that's why I take no credit in that, because any idea I have is just going to look like I'm looking at my TR8 right now, just going to be all funny colors and whatever. But I'm looking forward to. I'm always looking forward to the new designs.
Yeah, nice. So the Mark II, then the Deckard's Dream Mark II, which came as a shock. I don't think anyone was expecting that necessarily. So have you essentially just surface mounted a lot more of the components? I mean, how do you go from that box down into something which is slim and desktop
on a tabletop? Well, it's basically when he got into the idea of Xerxes, when he was planning that, one issue that we always had was as you can tell, Deckard's has the 8 voice cards, and when you go into testing it, there's an issue with voice card 4, and you go in and pull that out and fix that. Now that all the voice cards are on the same PCB as the motherboard and everything, it's a whole kit and caboodle right there, and he just managed to get all the components on there. From the Rev 1 to Rev 2, is the voice cards. The voice cards used to be the same size as the DIY voice cards that you have.
Right.
The built unit, they're about a quarter of the size, and he did that by mounting components on both sides.
Right.
These, having them flat 2 sides of very densely populated boards, managed to get there. And so when he first came up with the idea to do that with Xerxes, he's already got into the planning of doing it for Deckard's, and now short of a couple of, we're getting some custom made sliders for it, and it's a simple bit of engineering for these guys to get done, and we can start doing the mass production. But with all the delays and shipping between a manufacturer of the slider and our firmware guy, that's holding us up there. But it's going to be a fun little thing to carry around.
Yeah. I mean, are there any other major differences? I couldn't really, if I remember rightly, I couldn't pull out much else that was different between them.
Operationally, no. The only the big change is the feet sliders that change the octave or the fifth that the pitch is on, and the function of the LFO, instead of being a smooth slider, it's going to have clicks.
Okay.
And you'll on the panel you'll be able to switch between sustain 1 and sustain 2, and the time of the sustain, which for people who are like keyboard players, I'm not a player, but it's a thing that they were kind of hoping to make it like it's inspiration.
Mm. Do you think the kit is as easy as it's so compacted into space?
Oh, the kit hasn't changed. The kit is the same one that you have.
Oh, I see. Right. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense then. Because I was assuming that Struth, you're going to have to do a whole load of very tight soldering to do the Mark II kit. Oh, but the kit is the same. Right. Yeah. That's an important piece of information. Thank you.
That would be a very, very niche market to be able to ask for that level of precision out of the builder. I think we like 3 kits.
Okay. Well, that's good actually, because I did have this slight twinge that it's taken me so long to build this kit that its usefulness as a series of videos is kind of lessened because there's now a new version that's a different kit. But as the same kit is continuing, then that's actually really good. That's that doesn't make me feel so bad about taking this long. I mean, I reckon if I sat down and actually built one, it would only take a couple of weeks. I think, working at it solidly, a couple of weeks is really all you need, assuming you have all the bits and aren't waiting around for answers to questions or whatever. Because
I think the average length of time for like the experienced or averagely experienced builders is about 50 hours total.
Yeah, no, that seems about right. I mean, because even the videos I've done, I've only really done, I don't know, I've done 4 or 5 now, and each one's about a day, I suppose, in tackling what it is that I'm tackling. And I can imagine the next one I'm going to do is going to take a day or an afternoon just doing the hardware, which is the I/O interface for the back, and the power supply, I think, the fan in the back, I don't know, those little bits and pieces. And then I've got the voice cards, and that's the final thing. So I mean, I reckon the voice cards, I mean, I've seen people, I saw there's a guy in Argentina called Jim, I can't remember. He builds crazy weird valve and analog synthesizers, and I saw he did a time lapse of him doing all the voice cards, and it must have only taken him a couple of hours, I reckon, and he was doing 8. So it must be possible.
Right? That's his YouTube channel. Is that the one you were talking about?
Who? Sorry,
Tommy. The YouTube channel that you saw the guy doing all the voice cards. I want to say like Tommy Tonga or something.
It could be.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's an impressive name. He does impressive stuff. So I don't think it can be that hard, and they're not that dense either, as you say. Those voice cards in particular, it's just the surface mount that you have to think about and get through. But I mean, looking in my box of bits, I have a lot of bits still to do. Packets and packets. It's like, oh my god! But no, I'm going to get there. I'm determined to get there. I mean, because I also have a new project lined up as well. I see, because I need to move this on. When you're done with code, it would be fun to like have a talk and kind of get feedback from you on what we can do to improve the whole customer relations of that thing. I know you're doing the interview here, but I want to bring the conversation back to Superbooth. Yeah, go.
If that's cool. Not necessarily just out of all the announcements of new gear and stuff, but what new gear are you sweating? I watched your last video and I'm like, Now I have to buy a whole bunch of new modules because. But what are your what are the things that you're not seeing so much um, hype behind that you're getting excited for?
That's a good question. That requires me to have some kind of memory
Yeah,
of things. I tend to get swept along in the moment and then forget all about it. Um,
sure.
the I mean, my personal search for things within the modular world tends to lurch about a bit. At the moment, I'm looking for effects to some degree. I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking for some good grungy distortion. I'm very taken with Casper Electronics. He sells stuff through
Okay.
Bastel, and
Mm-hmm.
he's had a couple of sort of awesome modules over the last couple of Superbooths that are very interesting in that vein, all about cross distortions and moving overdrives into other things, because there's just areas of
Sure.
my rack I'd like to beef up without just amplifying them into terrible clipping. Something that's a bit more controlled and
Sure.
purposeful, than that.
I've got a lovely thing for effects right here. This guy, have you heard of this?
Oh
Specular
wow.
Tempest? Yeah. It's made by an Indonesian company called GFI Systems. And it's this amazing delay and reverb. It's all digital, but it sounds gorgeous.
Mm.
And pairing this up, like I just have the cables coming out of the last effect module, which is the Folk Tech altar
Oh
on
nice.
the. So I basically, my main mixer is the WMD performance mixer, and that has
Yes.
two aux channels that go
Hmm.
out. So I have one that goes into the Erica Synths DSP Pico DSP
Yeah, I've got
because
that.
it's a mono going in with left and right going out. That
Hmm.
going into alter two, which goes over into the Rainmaker, and that's like that effects chain. And then the other one goes into a second Pico DSP, which goes into the alter one, which goes out into this. And this guy, it just sounds like heaven. It's a really nice reverb. So I highly, highly, highly recommend these guys.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah, it's a
interesting.
pedal. Have you started getting into pedals? This is my
I
one.
have a couple. I mean, I sold a lot of pedals in order to buy modules. Funnily
Okay.
enough, because I have this love hate relationship with guitar effects. Being a guitarist, in that I'm
Yeah.
always suckered into buying something complicated and then struggling with it and ultimately hating it. So I've been through every Line 6 thing. I had a Flexitone
Okay.
amp. I had 100 different amp modules, all of which I didn't understand or like.
Mhm.
And then I had a floorboard that went with that, which gave me 1,000 models of different guitar pedals. And really, all I ever wanted was a clean channel, a grungy channel, and a delay pedal. I mean, that's it. Maybe a
Okay.
wah, if I'm feeling really flamboyant. And I would struggle with all these multi effects and all these other boxes trying to make it work. Whereas now I've got. Well, no, see, I didn't. I see, I failed again. But I had an orange amp for a good
Mhm.
chunk of time, and that was a really good purchase. The only difficulty being I couldn't have it above 2 at any point anywhere. I don't think, and
Too
it
loud.
it broke my back to move it. So those were
Yeah.
two factors. So I recently decided, every 20 years I like to buy myself a guitar. I'm not that
Mhm.
prolific with guitars, but I thought right now I'm going to go and trade in my Les Paul and my Rocker 30 orange amp and just get something simple and light and new. So I got a lovely black Telecaster, which is very much like a guitar I had 30 years ago, and I bought a Boss Katana, which does have a few effects and bits and pieces inside, but it's simple enough that I'm not having to worry about it. It's light, it has a good sound, it does the job, and it's simple. It's simple. I don't need anything else, and
Yeah.
that's very very refreshing and releasing, and it makes my guitar playing so much lighter than it has been previously. But I picked up when I sold my last sort of pedals before I got the Katana, which has a couple of effects built in. I picked up a couple of TC/Behringer pedals. So I got a delay, a chorus, and I've also got a reverb over there as well. And they're great, for what they are. They do the job, and I can loop those through my modular potentially, and I have done. So I think that's a good way in. But I guess I'm trying to find a way of exploring effects within the rack. Is ultimately where I'm trying to get to, I guess.
I've been kind of torn with that because you only have so much limited rack space on the system that you like to carry around. So that's why I was encouraged to get the pedal. But I get what you mean. Have you ever played around with the Rainmaker?
No, I'm not. I'm familiar with the name. I'm not familiar with the module. But I had a Clouds, if it's similar to that.
Yeah. I've never played on the Clouds. It's funny. Like the most famous modules, I have no experience with. I've only briefly played with a Maths or any of the mutable instruments. I never really had so much time with them. But the tricky thing with the Rainmaker is it does end up starting to write the music for you if you just go through the presets. So you do have to really dig in. So that's kind of the danger of like the more complex effects units. You're like, okay, this sounds really amazing, but does it sound like every other? So like there have been times when I've been out at an event, at a rave or something, and heard something, I'm like, oh my god, that's that washboard preset from So it's like noticeable. So just I guess the secret with effects is trying to keep things simple and trying to stay away from the presets that sound like someone's preset. I think like Richard Devine has a bunch of presets in here, so they all sound
well. That's
really
fatal.
good.
That's the kiss of death. I think that's the problem with that is when whenever Richard has written a bunch of presets for you, you're going to hear them everywhere. So don't do that. I really like the Pico DSP. I have one of those. That's my reverb. I think actually that spends most of its time as on a bus as a reverb. And at the moment, I've gone through a lot of delays because I've done some reviews of modules. I did a review of the Eventide Euro. What's it called? I can't read it from here. Euro delay, I think it is, which was interesting and nice, but slightly too complicated. The Magneto, I've famously got over here out of the rack because I'm not using it at the moment. So also famously complicated.
My wish list. That's deep.
I know. Look at the back on that. It's nuts.
Wow. That's on the wish list. But once I find space, I'll sell some other.
Apparently, what Strymon have said is that the power restrictions on Eurorack is one of the things that prevents them from doing more modules because the amount of power, DSP power required to do some of their big Sky stuff is just too much. For the sort of power supplies that go into Eurorack, which is interesting. Hadn't considered that at all. I just assumed they're being lazy,
I have, with anything, I guess digital modules tend to take up more electricity or more power, and so like when I have the alters in when the system's not warmed up yet, and if I touch the little plate to change the setting, it'll just jump through them. And then sometimes it'll just automatically go so like it's on setting 7 where they're all on. You're familiar with the altar, right? The Folktech.
The Folktech. I'm familiar with the beauty and artistry of Folktech modules. Although I'd never met anyone who'd had one until yesterday when I was interviewing Panic Girl, and she had one. So, really? Wow, fantastic! And now you have one. That's 2 people back to back. But yeah, it's one of those weird things. I've written about them a lot, but their demos are never very helpful, I find. And they seem to be. Yeah, that's the fella. They're just gorgeous.
And you touch that little plate in the middle, and it has 6 lights, or 5 lights. 1, 2, And like if you hold it, it'll go into the 7th preset. And both Alter 1 and Alter 2 have different combinations of delays, and it's really noisy. It uses like these digital chips that do bring in a lot of noise, but that's kind of part of its charm. I'm interested in like the electroacoustic stuff that they do, like the what is it, the
The
something garden,
garden
the micro
thing.
garden. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like look, the guitar going through the So I'm like really interested in that kind of stuff. Like I just bought a Slinky. Slinky to go into the and this is just because Paul from Error Instruments,
Mm.
he posted a video of somebody, just doing the Star Wars laser sound of like, contact microphone on one of these and going through some reverb. And okay, so
Yeah, it's an interesting way of
venturing,
bringing the outside in, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
bringing kind of real world stuff, and then just a bunch of just random weird instruments laying around here to to just go outside of VCOs and stuff like that. I don't want to make it a whole big show and tell, but
Well, that's what we like. Yeah.
Another thing, and I'm sitting right in front of me, is that you talked with Richard from Pittsburgh Modular,
Yes.
and their the voltage research laboratory.
Yes.
This is my favorite thing right now. This actually going into what I have in front of me are my new 3 favorite things, which is the voltage lab, the specular tempest, and the 014 drum synth. This guy.
Oh, really? Yeah. See,
Have you
that's
seen that?
interesting. Yeah, no, I saw that last year at Superbooth, I think it was. And the thing that I couldn't quite get over in my head is that it's not a drum machine, in that it's a bunch of drum sounds, and it's like, but where's the sequencer? Where's the, what are we supposed to do with this thing? So that's interesting. Yeah, you found a good use for it, though.
Yeah, well, so there are 2 uses for it. First of all, like, and this has actually gotten me back into. I used to be, fully into Ableton before I started using all the modular stuff, and now it gives me a reason to go back into Ableton and do some sequencing in there. And I found like this really great Max for Live patch called like IDM drums, and then like sending that out, and then just adjusting the pitch and whatever. You get some pretty interesting beats out of this, and it has a repeat function, which can, if you timing just right, it just takes away, like, it's instead of a swing, it puts like a really just coolness to the beat, like a humanism to the beat that like kind of takes away from like the 808 909 kind of like that kind of sequence. So I like the fact that it doesn't have the sequencer, because it makes you look at it and approach it a different way.
Yeah.
And happy accidents. But it would be nice if it had trigger inputs.
Yeah, is it just MIDI? Do I remember that rightly? It's just MIDI?
It's MIDI, and outputs it has a mix out, and then it has individual outs for each channel. And each channel can make exactly the same sound.
Right.
And so I got one of those VP ME Trig 31 module, which you can send triggers into, and it sends the MIDI out. So that one day when the virus allows the post to come through, that'll show up, and then I'll be able to control this with the Eurorack. But for now, I'm having fun using it through Ableton.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing. Oh, I can't quite reach. But I've got an Arturia Keystep Pro they sent me. I haven't got it out of the box yet, but that would be a great thing to go along with that.
For sure.
In some ways, I'm kind of saving that for when the Deckard's ready, because I'm kind of seeing like one track of these amazing chords I'm expecting it to play. I'm expecting to be able to dial up the most sumptuous sounds ever in the world. Having that alongside the Eurorack. I'll get the cables tied up. So yeah, I'm kind of saving that at the moment for a space where I have some time for it. But I think that would be good. But it would be a good module to run with that. I'm trying to find MIDI bits to plug into it.
The one thing I'm guessing the Keystep Pro doesn't have polyphonic aftertouch.
Good question. It certainly has polyphony and aftertouch, but polyphonic aftertouch, no. I mean, I've got a rolly little Seaboard block as well, which was going to be my main controller for the Deckards. I understand there's some kind of hack you need to do to make that work, or you need to route it via something. I'm not quite sure.
That's really easy. If you there's an app. You're on Surface.
Yeah.
You're using the Surface. So like for Mac, there's an app called MIDI Patch Bay, and I imagine there must be one for Windows too. And it's just as simple as just routing, having them both connected. And
okay, yeah.
just routing.
I mean, if it's just routing the MIDI around, then yeah, there's things like MIDI aux can do that on Windows, certainly. So no, I don't foresee that as an issue. So I just sort of saw something about it and thought, all right, yeah, that's just reminding me that it won't necessarily work immediately when I plug these things together.
That's a very, very, very easy fix. You have your USB going to your interface, MIDI out from the interface into Deckard's, the C board going USB right into that, and then you just connect them through MIDI Patch Bay. Before I knew about MIDI Patch Bay, I was telling everyone they needed to buy that little Kenton USB to MIDI host box. So some people were like, "Oh, I have to pay another $150." Yeah, I was like, sorry, but yeah, I found a free way to do it.
So I mean, I imagine retro kits will probably do something similar. I mean, I've got this one, which is can't read it. What is it? Is it a 004? Yeah, it's the through box. I plug one thing in and I get a whole load of MIDI coming out. That's all I know.
Oh wow!
So
really...
yeah, it's a good looker.
Who makes that?
Things at the camera. Sorry?
Who makes that?
Retro Kits.
Retro Kits, okay.
Retro Kits, yeah. They've got a few really useful MIDI solutions that do that kind of thing. I did that. I did a video of like 5 synthesizers on a desktop, little farty synthesizers. I plugged them all together, tried to get them all to do a super drone, which was kind of fun, and then a super ARP, which was also... I enjoyed it. I don't think they're my most successful videos, but there we go.
Well, I mean, those are probably the videos that I seek out for like solutions that I need in my space. I'm trying to go for like the right combination of having Ableton involved, having MIDI gear involved, and the modular and everything synced together in happy harmony.
Well, that's a journey, that one is. Have you used CV tools in Ableton?
Well, I was using, before Ableton did that, I was using the Expert Sleepers, I forget what it was called. It was just the app that they used to send the signal through the interface with Silent Way. I used to use that to control my 101, and now I'm really interested in a lot of what they have for the interconnectivity between the computer and the modular, but I can't figure out what specifically. Right now, I use the Manther. That from Maleko.
Mm-hmm.
Manther's a lot of fun, and so I have that MIDI synced, and that has a clock out, and that goes into the Varigate 8, and that controls the clock of the whole Eurorack system, so everything stays in sync with that.
Yeah,
and it's not relatively, it's really tight, which is fun.
Nice.
But it's a bit of rooting, and because of my limited space issues being in Tokyo, I need to use really long patch cables, and it gets a bit awkward considering this is also my living room.
Yeah. No, trying to get everything to run together is one of those battles I think that we are faced with after dumping everything into the computer like we did 10 years ago, and thinking we'd solved all our problems. Yeah, but then we realised that we don't actually like it in the box that much, and now we're back to trying to work out how the heck do we get this to work. I mean, I remember trying to get SMPTE to run with DAWs, back when Cubase was new. And you were striping tape, and you were trying to get that to read back through, and trying to find an audio interface which could vary sample rate so it could stay in time, with the time code coming back in off tape. And God, that was, let alone getting Cubase to be in time with itself. I mean, that was also quite hard at that time.
There's an even trickier element that I'm trying to introduce into the whole menace here, and that's I recently acquired a Honer Rhythm 80. You see this little. Oh shit! There's an earthquake coming. Earthquake! Oh wow! There's about to be an earthquake. Yeah. In Chiba. So we're about to feel an earthquake shortly. All right, hold on. Oh. I think it's over because you see this? This is swinging.
How bizarre.
Yeah. What was the level? Okay. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a big one.
Well, if you need to go and hide somewhere, then, by all means, go and hide.
No, I mean, this lamp is swinging enough to let me know that we've experienced it. How's the wine doing? All right. Yeah. Japan is a land of many earthquakes. So, yeah, we're cool.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to get my nail by this, but what I was getting at was the Honer Rhythm 80. Obviously not a MIDI machine or anything, and it's got a bunch of pre-programmed drum beats. Oh, I lost you. Oh, there.
No.
And the great thing, like, it sounds amazing. It's like kind of like a CR78 with square dancing type beats, and really amazing sound, but no MIDI. So how do you sync that? And I'm trying to figure out. There was a Max for Live patch called Beat Seeker for Ableton, and I need to kind of dig that up and kind of relearn how to use that. And what I'm the goal is to have the audio coming out from the drum machine into Ableton, into the Beat Seeker, and then the Beat Seeker, clocking Ableton sending the clock out to the Manther, while going out to everything else through the Eurorack. So it's a big little network of a lot of opportunities for error.
So, of course. I mean, I was inspired by a seminar I did with a guy called Gerald from 808 State, and he did a little gig at the end of the seminar, and he had two laptops both playing Reason, and he had no sync whatsoever.
Yeah,
he just. He would set one going, and he would tap the tempo into the other one and set that one going, and he'd adjust it a little bit as he went. He said he not interested in sync. He can feel when things are together, and he likes the looseness of things perhaps running apart from each other and then bringing it back together. Just brilliant. Yeah. I mean, because we fuss about these things so much, that it gets to be a distraction, I think, and some. It reminded me that sometimes we just need to let these things go and just rely on our own sense of rhythm.
Yeah. So I think that would add enough humanism into and there are all these things to introduce human aspects into computer programming applications and stuff. So I think there is a Max for Live patch called the Humanizer.
No.
Just knock things off a little percentage to make it sound a little more organic. And I like mistakes. I like going into a club and hearing the DJ bringing in a track and it's slightly off, and then they babysit it just so it just kind of phases right in, and that's my favorite moment of any yes, I can get pretty sloppy if I DJ, and bringing it in, it's okay, that warm feeling. My first concert that I went to was New Order was the main act, and this was 1987, before they really tightened up, I guess. And I guess if you listen to any of their old recordings, I liked the mess that it was. It just makes it feel like a real live experience versus if you. A friend of mine bought me a ticket to go see the Eagles, and the first song that they played was Hotel California from start to finish. It sounded as it does on the CD.
Right.
And I'm like, why does anyone pay to hear it in a reverby arena rather than just hearing the nice CD version if it's not going to be any different.
No, interesting.
I like mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I also like the Q button, the quantize. Because I embrace mistakes and I like mistakes certainly when performing. But when I'm trying to record something or write something, I inevitably have to go and fix everything. It drives me nuts. But again, it's another one of those reasons why I try to get out of the box, because the box is driving me crazy. Because I could fix everything, I would fix everything. It's the same. I mean, in my videos, the amount of editing I do is stupid. Every sniff and snort and cough, I have to edit out. It's just the way of things. But it does make for a snappier video, I think, ultimately.
I'm going to start looking for those editing points in your videos now.
Constant 5 seconds, another one, 2 seconds, boom, boom. But there we go. I mean, in some ways, I'm surprised I get away with these live streams, because I seem to manage to do it without sniffing or coughing too much. It's I don't know. It must be the fear, perhaps.
I think you're doing all right. But I'm like, as I mentioned before, I don't know much. I'm not good with visual kind of stuff, but I'm starting to see. I'm starting to appreciate good editing in videos. There was like a World War II documentary on Netflix, like World War II in colors or something. And it's like real actual footage, and everything is about like 6 minutes per video. And they're like kind of narrating the whole story out of it. But like you'll get the 6 seconds and then switch to another thing, and you can get the whole story out of it, which is like fascinating. So I don't want to say that's a new hobby I want to explore or anything, but I do have an appreciation of what you guys have to do for the editing.
Well, not everybody does it. I mean, plenty of people post videos without any editing at all, which blows my mind for other reasons. It's like you could make yourself just look slightly better. The flow of speech could go if you just pull out those stupid bits. I don't know. Maybe there's a desire for authenticity. Maybe that's part of it. But I'm quite happy to project a more professional version of what I am. That makes me feel good.
But I'm glad I had a bit of practice with Richard in his live video before coming into this one, because I feel like this one's a little smoother at that. Cool. But maybe the sauce has helped.
Yeah. Well, this is our life, man. We have to do this forever now, because we're never coming out of this lockdown. This is our lot. Yeah. So.
Well, they're gonna have to start exporting Tannenzapfel beer from Berlin for me to want to participate in Superbooth. I'm gonna have to do it from Tokyo.
When is the Tokyo Modular Festival? Have we passed that already?
That's in November.
Oh, is it? That's still within the realms of possibility then, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, you have a couch to crash on, but you're a bit tall for this one.
I would love to come to Tokyo. It's definitely one of the places that's on my bucket list to visit, having never been. I've been to Laos, funnily enough. That's my experience of almost that part of the world. Laos, a little bit of Thailand. Sorry?
What was in Laos? Why did you decide to go there?
A girlfriend was in Laos. She was working out there, running a Montessori preschool for expats, or for people who were working out there for the UN at the time.
Okay.
And
cool.
So she was out there for a couple of years. So I went out sort of for 2 summers, for a couple of weeks, for 2 consecutive summers, which was fascinating. I mean, it was kind of pre-tourism almost. They were just waking up. So things were happening to make things work a bit better, like the internet, things like that. But also it was very much like I guess it's very much like Vietnam was before it turned itself over to more tourism. So it was a very authentic, strange place where you were followed around and pointed at for being white, and Western, which is a remarkable experience. So,
but the only knowledge I have of that is from King of the Hill. The neighbors are Laotian, and they're like, "You're not Laotian." Yeah, like just the way that they treat the neighbors there That's
Yeah.
the only thing I know about us. But maybe it's worth visiting. The
Yeah,
food,
no,
I've
it's
been to a lot.
fascinating.
Yeah.
They did a Sue. Oh, I can't remember her name now. Oh, from
Suki
Melon Sue. Sorry.
hmm?
Oh, it doesn't
From
matter. There's a two women presenters, comedians in the UK called Mel and Sue Perkins. That's the name. And Sue
okay.
Perkins is this wonderful person and articulate presenter type person, and she did a documentary all the way down the Mekong, which separates
Hmm.
somewhere from somewhere, Laos from Thailand, I suppose, and
Okay.
and that was fascinating. I mean, the extraordinary culture and stuff that's still going on our planet, you know, that seems so alien to Western
Yeah.
eyes, or to my eyes certainly. It's a fascinating place, that sort of thing. So
Sure.
yeah, I mean, Tokyo also exists, or Japan exists, in that slightly mystical realm, although with a heavy bunch of cyberpunk sort of bolted on the side. I think I'd enjoy
Yeah.
both of those flavors.
Tokyo is definitely a bit more interesting if you have the right guides,
Yeah.
rather than feeling like a tourist. And one thing, I am really happy about the pandemic is that as I'm going to the office, there aren't a bunch of people, holding selfie sticks and just kind of in the way, just being obnoxious tourists. I
Yeah, I
mean, our
suppose.
office is kind of right in the middle of it all, so it's nice that it's kind of empty, and we go in as we need, and you know, it's nice to have that pace slowed down. On the downside, there are a lot more rats.
How interesting.
Like, they're a lot more comfortable coming out with the lack of people. So I did have one jump out at me as I was taking out the trash the other day at the
See,
office.
see, that's the flip side, because a lot of green-focused people have been telling us about how well the world is recovering, which is awesome news. But that does mean the bad stuff, along with the the good stuff of nature, as well as the more troubling side of nature, I suppose.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with rats. I mean, they're the food for the crows. And
Yeah, no, fair enough.
but yeah, so that's and I guess being there long enough, when you see a rat, some people are like, a rat, it's like, all right, just go. um, so you kind of you live in a world of coexistence with them, and it's like, okay, just finish what okay, just finish scurrying across, and
So,
then you say hi.
are you heading towards live performance, do you think, with your modular? Is that something that you foresee happening?
I Yeah, I mean, I do play live already. Not so often. I used to DJ pretty frequently,
Yeah, I've seen
and
pictures of you DJing.
I was starting to get into live stuff, but now I just kind of want to redo the way that I do live things, because I prefer a more improvisational approach.
Yeah,
Ideas of showing up to a place and not having anything patched, and then like spending like an hour or two during sound check to kind of get things going. Other times I do like to go in with things patched, but the way that my rack is now, my mixer is on like a 1U little boat, so I
right.
have to disconnect from everything. Anyway, it kind of I'd like to say I force myself to do that, but that's just how the power works.
Well,
That's
situations push us into configurations, don't they? So, and
yeah.
that's part of the it's part of the process.
So a part of me wants to have everything set up so that everything's totally in sync. So when I want to go to this device or that device, then it's ready. But I'm starting to get an appreciation for the approach of, okay, I just need these few things, so I'm going to set these three things up now and just play with those and focus on those, rather
Yeah.
than just having it available at once. And I guess it's just you know how overwhelming you want to have things going. you
Well,
know.
I think because modular seems to be forever in flux, it's forever evolving. I mean, mine is certainly because I'm getting stuff in for review and then sending
Yeah,
stuff back out again, and so
yeah,
it's constantly coming apart and going back together again. So realistically, having everything set up and working, it's not, it's never going to happen.
it's not, yeah, it's not
Yeah,
a,
so I try to enjoy parts of it that are working at one time,
yeah,
and then something else.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
perhaps.
think
So
I think, you know, the general environment I like to go with is just having a couple of people over and we're boozing or whatever, and you know, I have a little jam, and
nice.
you know, that's a fun experience with music. Made a bit or something. I'll post it on the SoundCloud. That's, you know, once in a while I'll dust off the SoundCloud that I currently post on, and you know, but no, it's um, it's a lot more personal, and then you know, it's not more for the excitement of being performing for like people, but like in a nice sounding room
Mm,
where you know, I can use a space to kind of guide the sound around, and people are into it. It was really fun. This past November, I played a gig in one of my favorite places, one of my favorite venues in Tokyo, called Kagurane, where you know you can only fit 50 people in there. It's a really tight space, but it's built like a sound studio, so the sound is really really tight, and it was nice because I was playing kind of like an ambient noise set, and not like a harsh noise set, but it was like,
hmm.
you know, like ambient kind of stuff, and it was like there were headbangers. Just because it just had some weird cross modulation that it rocked, but but it just sounded really good, you know.
No, that's brilliant.
And, yeah, but you know, so recently my parents moved up to Ithaca in New York.
Right.
It's like a 4 or 5 hour drive from New York City, kind of near like Niagara. It's about the same distance to Niagara Falls from Ithaca to New York City. And it's where Cornell University is, and it's where like Bob Moog is from. So there's like a
Right.
synth world there, and there is a lot of enthusiasm for electronic music and uh, synthesizers in general. And there are a lot of very talented artists there, but there's no venue for them to perform where it sounds like it really should.
Yeah.
We're still like listening to it as music with harmonies and melodies, and not listening to the particulars of like the sonic relationships of
Okay.
like how like, this oscillator is modulating this oscillator. You can't hear that, and you're not hearing like the spatial aspect of it. Um, so I, you know, because I go back there regularly, I want to work with them there to kind of like start making events there and making that a thing there, because I really love that city,
Mm.
and it's my home away from home. Obviously, my parents live there, and you know that's, you know, a thing that I'd like to work on.
Mm. Do you
Um,
think that's a struggle for modular musicians in finding a space that can
oh,
adequately
absolutely. Yeah,
cope with that sort of
yeah,
sound? Oh, that's interesting.
absolutely. Because you know, I mean, I still don't get how levels are managed in the modular system. I'm able to plug this division department drum machine into the WMD mixer, the voltage lab. They're all like, if you know, just have the levels right, everything sounds right. But you know, in a lot of situations, you know, like the modular levels are like, you know, always clipping and
Yeah.
not really working out right. Um, so when they go into a venue in Tokyo, a lot of the places have kind of a pro sound guy who's going to give you a DI box that is going to make it sound right. They're going to
Mm.
sit by the mixer and make sure you sound good. Uh, in a lot of venues I've been to in the US, you don't have that person. Or you may have a person who's just sitting there and he's mostly used to doing rock music.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you're not going to get, you know, people who are particular to that, where you get that a lot more here because yeah, these venues are more specific to a range of sound or more specific to electronic music. And that's, another reason that you really need to come to Tokyo. Because the benefit of going to Superbooth and going to the events after, it's similar, because like the venues that the events after Superbooth happen, my favorite place, Seabase. I don't know if you've been there, but I love that place.
No, I've never been there for longer than the day. That's the problem.
Oh, really? You just went for the day last year, right?
Yeah.
Seabase is like this weird hacker space where they have like a members section, and I wandered off into there because I'd been there the year before, and I thought it would be okay if I walked in there. And I saw a guy playing this video game, and he's like, "Oh, is that Doom?" And he's like, "Are you a member?" And I was like, "I'll show myself." But like the main performance area, like the guys from Tangerine Dream, Torsten and two members from Tangerine Dream would do a performance there, and it's like, just nothing. And it's like sonically, it's amazing. It's just like a really cute, cool, mellow experience, and you don't get that in too many places in the U.S., and especially like in smaller cities. It'll feel more like a high school dance than company space.
Yeah.
Although for the Molten, they did like Suzanne Chiani, she played in a performance hall on campus, and that actually sounded really good.
But again, they'll have professional people working on the sound, won't they? That's right. To actually have someone who's interested, trying to make it sound good, as you say, in a pub type situation. The guy just wants it to work. He doesn't care what it sounds like.
You think it sounds terrible? Have some more beers so it sounds better.
Yeah. Have you been interested in the push towards stereo? Is that we've seen a lot of stereo filters in the coverage over Superbooth this year, which would indicate the idea that we have stereo things going on in our racks. Is that something you've explored?
I'm answering this question coming from a company that, our first two synths are monophonic, monaural, polyphonic monaural synths, but and that's kind of one of our biggest complaints is they're not stereo. But I do like using the stereo field more. It does take up more rack space and obviously more cabling. I mean, I'm more interested in spatial sound. Suzanne Gianni's got me really into the quadraphonic kind of idea. We have a gallery / museum here called the ICC with an anechoic chamber in it. And the last time we went there's a catwalk that takes you right to the center of the room. That's all, like nothing reflects or anything. And sometimes they have different exhibitions. And the last one they had, there's a chair in the middle of the catwalk and 8 speakers. So it's an octaphonic sound system.
Right.
And it plays like a 15-minute clip of sounds and, things going on, an environment. And they have an emergency button at the bottom of the chair in case you freak out, because anechoic chambers have been known to freak people out. And I swear it's a completely dark room, and I was sitting there, and during that time I felt somebody tap my shoulder, and there was nobody in there, and I turned around. It does do things with your head, and like this spatial sound system is pretty amazing. So I'd be curious about that. There's a company called Enveloped. You heard of them?
Don't know. Depends what it is. Give me a context.
It's a company, I think, out of San Francisco. Roddy Lindsay is, I think, the head guy there. They've recently made a Max for Live patch, so you can send things out to more than just the left and right on your system. So right now, actually, you see the 2 traffic little things, like one's right here.
One second. Yeah, got them. Yeah.
You see this guy? And then this guy right here. All right, over there, I have like 2 other speakers that our engineer that works and lives in the apartment upstairs needed to borrow them. But usually I have those back there, and the 2 speakers here, and I use his Max for Live patch to send things around quadrophonically in the room. And so, yeah, the spatial aspect, I'm still kind of new to it, but it's a really wonderful way of having sound just go to that next level. So, yeah, I'm pro stereo, but I'm hoping ways are found that real estate on a modular rack can be kind of preserved somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking along the lines of, well, why don't we use stereo patch cables? Why don't we?
Yeah.
Would that be a possibility? I mean, I'm also reminded of software like Cherry Audio's Voltage Modular, for instance, that uses polyphonic virtual cables, which is just so you can route polyphony around the place, but it's visualized as a chunkier cable than your normal patch cables, and maybe that's something we could realize in the hardware world, so that we don't have to have these cascades of cables everywhere. Ooh,
there's one dark side of that. There's one dark and painful side of that. Can you imagine if all the cables got mixed up? You're going to need it. Realistically, yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, let alone all the standards that everyone else has to adopt, make everybody do the same thing is hard enough at the best of times. So,
what about a modular system that only uses DB25 connectors?
Ooh, crikey. Yeah.
That could be like next level. Maybe when MPE becomes more accepted.
Or maybe it just becomes a computer with a bunch of knobs on the front. That would solve everything. Just one massive touchscreen. There we go.
Yeah.
Running VCD rack, of course.
Yeah. So, I see a lot of possibilities in things like this, but in the current Eurorack system, introducing stereo cables could get a little wonky. I don't know. Maybe someone could develop like a cable that does it right, but I don't know if the market is ready for it.
No, I don't. It just makes me worry about how much space it's going to take up. That's the thing. I mean, stereo at the end, as you say, it thrown through your mixer, and you've got to send to some stereo effects. Yeah, that can all work. But I don't listen to my rack properly anyway. The sound is just sort of there in the room. I'm not trying to situate myself as such, which is something I should explore at some point, I think.
Yeah. I need to get more into like pro style recording on different channels. Every recording that I do on my modular is just like one channel in Ableton. Yeah. That's what I record, and then I'll add the multiband compressor and maybe ozone over it. And that's what will end up on the SoundCloud, or that I'll send to someone like, hey, what did you think of this? Yeah.
But again, we're introducing too many levels of stuff again. That's the problem. I mean, I really like the recording of the stereo output and that being enough, having that as your final destination. Otherwise I get lost in the multi-track, and then I'm editing it, and then before long I'm copying and pasting bits around the place, and it's like, stop the post-production. And then I've rewritten the bass line. Okay, I'll just get the Monarch in there, and I'll rewrite the entire that bit. And so it doesn't do me any good. Let's just like to click record and go, ideally. But
I think it's the tricky part when you're trying to compose music from an unorthodox perspective. When you go into songwriting, you go in with the starting bit, and then you go into the melody and the chorus and whatever. And if you're sitting there like, okay, I'm going to record this part for this in Ableton, blah blah blah. But if you're going in, because we have tools that interact in certain ways, it does expand how we want to use them. And I think the best compliment I've ever had on my music was, "This is music." You know what I mean? Well, yeah. And it reminds me, like when Ableton, when they started introducing their instruments, and they introduced Operator. Yeah. Robert Enke. He was like kind of the main developer of Operator, and towards the end of their presentation is like, this sound is like when you control LFOs to control the rates of other LFOs, and it plays this sound, and it was like the most fantastic sound I've ever heard. Is like, well, you might not think it's musical, but I think it's lovely. So, I just need to acknowledge this. Gonna need to crack open another one of these before I get into the meal. This is Chateau Haut-Vue. I can't read French.
Nice. It's from Bordeaux, anyway. Yeah, well, shall we see if the live chat has any questions for us? If you have a question for Bob about anything about Black Corporation or anything he's doing, his taste of wine.
I'm just realizing I'm wearing my Superbooth shirt.
I thought that was intentional. I assumed you were just naturally cool and on point.
No, I would have worn some cooler than this, but this is just a coincidence.
Yeah, well, I guess we're fortunate that you're wearing anything at all, I suppose, in these days. So yeah, any questions out there, do throw them in the chat before we bring this evening, afternoon, lunchtime chat to a slow close, as I imagine we probably should at some point. So do jump up and down if you've asked. You may have asked something already. Please do ask it again, because we have completely ignored you previously.
Yeah, we've just not been talking.
Yeah.
I definitely think we should follow up when you're done with your build, though. We should, on a chat. Then we can get into the nerdy aspects of that.
No, count on it. So I mean, there should be 3 videos to come. There's the hardware bit, there's the voice cards, and then there's the turning the flipping thing on. Just to see whether that, I don't know, that works. My assumption is that it will just work. It will just work, because that's largely been my experience so far. I mean, because I'm incredibly jammy, I imagine, but it's been, I've had no problems with any of my DIY attempts. So I don't know. I have no reason to believe it's just going to work. I'm just going with it.
So, like, as you were new to like a lot of the DIY builds, you haven't had anything that didn't work?
Nope.
It worked.
Everything's worked. I had a little bit of trouble with the Bafako. It was the wave shaper, but as I sort of took it apart, then one of the jack sockets fell out, and I realised I hadn't soldered it hardly at all. So that was the fault there. So I found that one relatively quickly, thankfully. As I say, I built a little synth with my kid just a couple of weeks ago. We're going to come back to it because it didn't work, but it turns out that the PCB itself was actually faulty. So that was good. And after a bit of rewiring and trying to adjust it and fix the problems that were wrong, they just sent us another one, and it all worked. So, well, there you go. These things happen.
So
my trouble.
50% on the 4 modules that I built for Erica. The Erica modules that I built. One was a mixer. The mixer works, no problem. The envelope generator, I built 2 of them. One of them works right, the other one does not. So our second Roman, we have 2 Romans at the company, Roman 2.
Yeah.
He's the engineer. I'm gonna ask him for a whole lesson on troubleshooting these things, because he's kind of the world's greatest synth repair guy. And
I have no troubleshooting experience at all. See, that's the downside, is I've not had project upon project where I've had to really methodically work through to fix something. I haven't had to do that yet, so I have nothing to rely on in that regard. Actually, Gertz was a little bit from Erica Synths was a little bit disparaging about my DIY, in as much as that he sees me as someone who just puts stuff together without understanding anything, and he says that has some value, but he would like to see, he didn't aim it at me specifically, but that's what I'm doing, and he would very much like to see me understand those circuits, understand why this goes with that, why that goes with that. And that's a fair comment and a fair aspiration, I think.
There is a channel that focuses on that. That's a synth DIY guy.
Yeah.
His.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, It's great. Like he sits down there like with a notebook and explain. That's not your shtick, you know.
No, no, you're right. No, I jump in both feet and with no safety net, and yeah, give it a go.
Yeah,
I am learning things. Damn it! There's things that they do. Some things stick in here. You know, I think. Well, we shall see.
You have to say, like, Molten music is one that like I resonate with like whenever I like see things that you're putting up, or like things that the way that you present things are very similar to like characteristically the same way that I would present them.
Cool.
When I see like for example like Div Kid, it's like he's very clinical and explains things in a way that like simplifies it for idiots like myself, and he gets me in during his way.
Yeah.
Lop is amazing because he does the sectioning of like the table of contents and
Yes.
and whatnot. Cuckoo is also a good word for that kind of stuff. And you're like the most similar to like, I don't know what I'm doing with this thing, but let's give it a go kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean there has to come but there'll come a time when I'm an expert in something, and that'll feel odd, I'm sure.
So your history is more about like it used to be before like doing the synth videos. You were doing more computer building.
Yeah.
That was your thing. I need to go back into those, but like, so what would be the biggest selling point to instead of using a Mac, using a Windows computer? I have an idea in mind personally about what would you say for that?
It's less of a selling point, more of a realization that first of all, whatever software you like to use, it's irrelevant what operating system you run it on. So if you're running it on Apple OS or Windows, it makes no difference in Pro Tools or Cubase or whatever. If there's a specific piece of software like Logic that you want to run, well then that answers your question. But generally speaking, in the usage of your software, the OS, it really shouldn't matter. So then it comes down to the power of the computer, and a PC can be every bit as powerful for a lot less investment money-wise, so you can potentially push it further. And all the old arguments about what works and what doesn't are largely irrelevant these days, I would say. So it's less of a. I mean, it used to be a time where I was going, oh no, if I build you a PC that's going to be far better than any Apple you could ever work. I used to feel like that. These days, I'm a bit more like, it really doesn't matter, and I don't feel passionate about it one way or the other. But what I do get upset about is people who dismiss Windows or dismiss a PC out of hand simply because they bought a £200 computer and expect it to work like a £2,000 Apple machine. There has to be some kind of balance to that. So if you put £1,000 down on a PC and build it properly, it will be awesome. Possibly. Potentially.
There's a small part of me that makes me want to take the plunge and just move to the Surface Pro.
Mm-hmm.
And especially because I do really want to move more towards the Bitwig approach over the not taking anything away from Ableton. Ableton is like something I've been using for the past 20 years, and something like I know better than I know most other things. And Bitwig, I'm still like on the learning experience of it, but it seems like they're doing a lot more complex things that would facilitate the way that I want to use software. And I think a big part of that would be the touch aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And why Apple hasn't done that yet you can do it on the iPad or whatever, but you can't use Bitwig or Ableton on an iPad, and that's very limiting. So I've been contemplating for the past year, like, should I just move on to the Surface and do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for the touch environment when you are combining with hardware, because if you're just running a regular laptop or a MacBook, to go from I'm doing this down into I've got to do this, okay, back to all of this again. That's so incongruous that it just drives me nuts. Whereas with a touchscreen, you can just, as people know with their iPads, you can do things quickly, easily, relatively. I mean, you've got to have a mouse in your back pocket somewhere just in case, if something goes awry. But otherwise, it's a really good fit. And Bitwig, I think, is great for that. I mean, their polygrid system is very deep, can be as deep as you like, but it's also simple enough to stick a couple of LFOs around the place and route that to different audio outputs to run to your thing is good. It's a good thing. Somebody actually asked in the chat whether you'd tried Bitwig, so that answered that question nicely without us having to.
I've tried Bitwig. I still, because there's a lot of unlearning involved with like kind of forgetting like how I just would naturally do something in Ableton, and there are some differences in how you would do it in Bitwig. So there's that I think has been the biggest challenge for me to learn it, and Mia from Bitwig is one of my favorite people in the world, and I'm always like, okay, it's time for me to finally sit there and like get through these tutorials, and I'll if I'm on a flight, then I'll try to get through a tutorial on how to learn Bitwig, but there's no internet on most flights. Ableton had, when I first learned Ableton, this was like in the early 2000s, they had a really great help section, and the way that I learned it was just I went through the first set of tutorials and just had my head around it, and then I was able to go from a musical idea from my head to my ears, in seconds. Whereas I'm sure I could do that with Bitwig, but it takes a lot of unlearning.
No, it is. There certainly are some differences about it, and you're right. That context help within Ableton is really useful, I think. Someone keeps going on about a xenomorph, as if we're supposed to know what that's about. I'd like to. Wagyu says I'd like to grill Bob on the project known as Xenomorph. Somebody else said.
Who does?
Someone called Wagyu, or Wag.
Yeah. Hi, Wagyu. I don't know Wagyu. That's nothing. I'm not involved in anything like that.
Okay. That's good. Somebody's asking whether you would ever consider providing the Deckard Stream kit with components. I think that puts you into a bigger load of tech support, would be my response to that, in having to do that whole thing.
That would be if somebody wanted to be, the guys over at SynthCube that you can get all the parts from, they already kind of do that, so it would be a little bit of it would be stepping on their toes, and the other part of it would be at Black Corporation there are 5 of us. There's Roman, myself, the other Roman, world's greatest synth repair guy engineer, who made Kijimi the legend that it's going to become.
Wow.
There's our programmer who does all the firmware, based in Irkutsk in Russia, and Ken Takagi, who's pretty well known in the modular synth community. Amazing solderer, amazing engineer, and very knowledgeable on builds. That's really it. So we want to focus on what we do. We don't really have time to actually put together kits with components and everything because I have to work on the taxes, for example. But
it also it gives work to another company like SynthCube. They're able to benefit from that. There's another company who makes the front panels and case, I think, for it, isn't it?
Cases, DIY Hub.
That's right.
That's Andrew Felix, based in LA. Lovely guy.
Yeah.
Him having the business doing the panels, it's good for him. He can feed his really cute dog. When
And my experience of both of those things is that it was no trouble getting it imported from the States, no bother at all, easily done. I went through the entire SynthCube components when they arrived to sort them. I thought it seemed to be a good place to start. It was just to sort them into boxes, and so I knew what I was doing. And I was able to, I discovered there's half a dozen things or a dozen things missing or wrong or something, and they were very quick to send out replacements, and sort that out. So, it's been very, very smooth in that respect.
Bunch of pros.
No, absolutely. So they do it all the time. I mean, they've got an ARP 2600 kit as well that they do, which has been very tempting. The TTSH, I think it is. I think, maybe. They're used to doing it. That's the thing. It's not going to be like you bunch of idiots sitting around the office trying to put resistors in a bag. Nobody wants that.
There are some times when we need to replace some S&D parts, and it will be like three of us going through boxes of leftover bits trying to find like 140 ohm kilo ohm resistors, and it's a big waste of time.
Yes. Yeah, no, it is. Yes, it is. Anything else we've got down here? No, other people suggesting Reason's a good thing to play with. Yeah, maybe.
Reason. Yeah, actually, Reason's gotten pretty amazing. I haven't touched it since probably the last century. Probably the last time I played with it was like in 1999, to be honest.
Wow.
No. That's not true. It was probably right around 2002, 2003, just before I moved here. I was working at a studio in DC called Metatrack, and it was like a DJ school and production school, and we had Reason, and that was also where I learned how to feed Reason into Cubase, and you could rewire and whatnot. Now, apparently, you can get all the noise engineering modules in Reason, which is reason enough to get it. I mean, what a fantastic lineup of modules to have in your arsenal, whether on your computer or they're my favorite modules, or among my favorite modules. But to be able to get the whole series there, so I see a lot of benefits of using Reason.
It seemed to stay stuck for a decade. That was part of it, I think. I mean, we are on version 11, I think, but when version 4 came along, it seemed to stay like that for version upon version upon version. Nothing seemed to happen. So it's good now that it's decided to go VST. That's a good move, I think.
About time.
But also they already had a modular system all built into the software where everyone else is going, modular, that's new and exciting, and Reason are going, we've had it for years, but we're not going to tell anybody about it, we're not going to make a fuss about it, we're just going to ignore the fact that we've got all this CV stuff going on, and it's like
another reason I guess to consider the Windows approach is Fruity Loops. I only spent maybe 20 minutes of my life using Fruity Loops, but one of my favorite DJs in the world, and really amazing producers, DJ Stingray, does everything in Fruity Loops. And it's killer. So
it can be. There's a lot of particularly of electronic music people who have spent their life from Fruity Loops and have moved all the way through its evolution into FL Studio and stuff. It's great. I mean, it's different. It has its own workflow, but it has a step sequencer for everything. You can pack in little sequences here, there, and everywhere. It's very manipulable and great for funky tunes.
Have you had much experience with the Akai, the standalone things? Or the new Polyen tracker?
No, not really. I mean, I guess
they're around that now, so I don't know if they're sending it out. People can review that.
no,
I'm curious about. And the
MPC Live and things and things.
MPC Live from Akai. So yeah, there are some interesting things from that. But I think for me to get into anything other than like just my old dog ways in Ableton, it's like it will take a lot of unlearning, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I'm really enthusiastic about learning Bitwig because it's such a fantastic program. But you know, just struggling to make the switch over because you know, of that, you know, just the unlearning involved.
Yeah. I mean, it's not as intuitive as I'd quite like it to be. I mean, there's simple things like I have to remind myself every time I find myself back in Bitwig that in order to get an output to any external gear, I have to create that output. It's not just there automatically like you kind of expect it would. It's like, because you know, from Cubase mentality, you create a MIDI track and you select from a drop down menu where I want it to go.
Yeah.
Do I want it to go this MIDI, that MIDI, internally, wherever it is? It's just there. Where in Bitwig you go, I don't know how to send this anywhere. I don't know how to tell it to use an outside MIDI interface, and that's because you've got to put in a device which allows you to do that. And that's one of its little stumbling blocks. I think that needs to be simpler somehow. Otherwise, you're scratching your head.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something that I'll address really soon. That's like, but and I'm sure like they must have heard that like 1,000 times.
They must have done, yeah. They must have done. But a lot of DAWs have these sort of MIDI control pages where you have to generate controllers and describe them and tell them about them, which I've always found annoying. I mean, Persona Studio One does that. Ableton does that to a degree. At least they're just tick boxes. But I don't understand why, if it's MIDI, it should be there. It should just be there. But no, that's
I mean that's more a limitation of the computer and like needing the driver for it. I'm glad we don't have to download drivers for many things now, which is a bonus. But like a bummer of like when everyone thought FireWire was the way to go after USB, and what like you know spend all this money on FireWire interfaces, for example, and then for a while you were like willing to deal with like a lightning to FireWire converter cable, and deal with the glitches involved with that, and so it sucks when there's a technology that comes in that like just disappears, and you know you put in the time, the investment in that.
Yeah.
But I think you know, honestly, like if you're new to learning a DAW, I think like Bitwig would be the place to kind of focus on learning, because I really see a big future with them as far as the whole computer aspect of it, especially when related to keyboards. Ableton, you know, I think you know they're going to stay strong forever. Like with Max for Live, when they first announced, like I think about a year and a half before they started putting out Max for Live, when they made the announcement that they were partnering up with Cycling 74 that was doing that does Max MSP. When they made that announcement, it was like maybe a year after they made the announcement of the relationship with Serato. I'm familiar with the DJ software Serato.
Yeah.
And, you know, I used Serato when I was DJing, and I was like kind of excited with that. I was like able to, you know, play records and, you know, play live doing hybrid sets, but it just, they never got the logistics right of the software working together. Then when I saw the Max MSP relationship, like a year and a half before they announced it, it was like really exciting. And I think that's going to be, you know, a standard over, say, Logic. And God, I haven't used Cubase in so long, so I can't say much about that.
But it's such an environment. I mean, it's become a place where so many other people have been able to develop for, that it's, I mean, I find it massively complex and it sort of gives me a headache. But devices that you can run in that space
allows so much flexibility, right?
Yeah. It's just dripping with with potential, and people do amazing things in it. Always, it's a very creative programming platform. Nothing quite like it, I don't think.
Sure.
Well, sadly, I think we probably need to bring this to a close because it's 3:00 here, and it must be your bedtime by now. And your dinner will be well cold. So, so we probably better bring this to a close. But so thanks ever so much for spending time with me, mate. That's been really good. An opportunity to get to know you a bit better and to chat about these crazy things. We'll definitely book in an opportunity once I've cracked this Deckard's dream. We'll get that back and have a good chinwag about it, because that'll be great. Because I want to do.
I realized this after my talk with Rich, because actually towards the end of the conversation, we realized there are a lot of musical things in common, musical tastes in common, and that would be a fun thing to talk about. Way in the future after the Deckard's build and stuff. I'd like to pick your brain on that, because the last video you said you had a few albums out, and I still haven't had a chance to listen to them, but I'm going to listen to them now. Yeah. And those are going to be some fun territories to explore. And
this is old stuff, man. Old stuff.
Yeah.
Old stuff.
Dude, I have a bunch of American music from 2005 as well. So, and so that would be a fun thing to get into. But for now, it's been great talk and great seeing you.
Yeah, nice one. Well, just to let everybody know that we're coming to the end of this little series of Superbooth chats now. I've got Peter Young from Tenderfoot Electronics on Wednesday, same time, lunchtime, because he's out in Taiwan. So we're doing a similar lunchtime thing. And then we have This Is Not Rocket Science on Thursday. And then I'm gonna not do some videos for a few days, get myself together, and then we'll have a chat about where we go from here. So I think that's all coming up. So thanks ever so much for being in the chat, people who have been watching live, and all you out there who are watching afterwards, because I know it's a strange time to have these sorts of things. But that's good. Stay safe, stay groovy, and Bob. Yeah, and Bob, thanks again, and we will end the stream here, I think. So yeah. Take it easy, everybody out there.
See ya.